Joining us here today on NewsX World. Political parties in Venezuela have called for the immediate release of opposition leader Juan Pablo Guanipa after he was rearrested just hours after being freed from prison on Sunday. Supporters say that his detention undermines recent political prisoner releases. Let's listen in.
No es posible que ellos hayan emitido una boleta de excarcelación que solamente decía dos condiciones, pero ellos hoy están alegando otras cosas. Una vez más queda en evidencia que el régimen no tiene una voluntad política realmente de avanzar y de que logremos una democracia plena y lograr una libertad absoluta de todos los presos políticos, que hay que dejar claro que no han cometido ningún delito, solamente pensar.
Meanwhile, relatives and activists have expressed deep disappointment after talks in the National Venezuelan Assembly to approve further amnesty for political prisoners were postponed. The delay has dashed hopes that hundreds more could be freed, leaving families frustrated and mistrustful of official promises. Let's listen in to some of their reactions.
Y hoy enterarme que las pospusieron, las suspendieron, no sé, ya me siento muy mal. Es una burla para los sentimientos de las personas que estamos acá, los familiares, la espera tan larga. Me siento muy decepcionada, la verdad.
Todo el mundo habla de la ley de amnistía y ayer hubo excarcelaciones sin que la ley esté aprobada. Es decir, que no hace falta la ley para hacer excarcelaciones de gente inocente.
Moreover, in a related development, freed political prisoners marched in protest shortly after their release in Caracas, calling for the complete and unconditional liberation of all detained opposition figures. Let's listen in to one such human rights activist who had been detained since his arrest in December 2024.
Creo que tengo una expectativa muy alta de cómo los venezolanos han perdido el miedo y cómo lo van a seguir perdiendo, porque ahorita necesitamos más que nunca desobedecer a quienes están en el poder, necesitamos más que nunca organizarnos y avanzar para poder arrancarles el poder y tener una elección general que nos lleve a tener autoridades que genuinamente representen la soberanía popular.
We are now being joined by Ambassador Vishwanathan, who's a former ambassador to Venezuela. Thank you so much for joining us here today. What does the rearrest of the opposition leader shortly after his release say about the government's commitment to political reform and reconciliation?
The Venezuelan government would do this release and manage the transition process gradually with full control. Because they wouldn't like suddenly to open up everything and have a serious problem of serious protests and agitations at the moment. You remember even what Trump says. He says first stabilization, then recovery, and then only transition. So they're also following the same path as Trump says.
And how might the postponement of the amnesty talks affect trust between Venezuela's ruling authorities and the opposition, as well as public confidence in the possibility of genuine change?
Of course, there is absolutely no trust between the opposition and the government. The opposition believes in Trump, and they don't give space for the government and accommodate them and compromise with them and reach a mutually agreeable settlement. They are using Trump to show his guns at their head and try and get concessions. This is not a viable or sustainable formula for transition or to democracy. Eventually, the opposition and the government have to work together and do a deal directly between themselves. It is wrong on the part of the opposition to use Trump at every opportunity to bully and intimidate the government. And the government would, of course, react and manage in a way to control this.
What prompted the rearrest of Juan Pablo? And how does this affect the opposition strategy moving forward?
Apparently, he had violated the conditions of release by making some public statement or something which the government did not like. Anyway, this kind of thing, push and pull, will go on. And it's not going to open up suddenly and become a free and open society tomorrow. No, it will take another at least 3 years.
And can the growing protests in Venezuela bring about any change in the government's stance on opposition leaders and political freedom?
No, absolutely no. Opposition had been protesting for over a decade. The regime is very well entrenched and strong, and a lot of people have emigrated, and the other people, they have fear, so they have used up all their energy in so many protests in the past, and then the opposition had been misleading the people, saying that the regime would go tomorrow. It has happened. So people are also tired and exhausted. So I don't think there would be any serious and dangerous protest to overthrow the regime internally or bring about a change. No, it's not going to happen.
And how effective can the proposed amnesty law be in addressing political grievances if opposition parties remain sceptical and key leaders are still targeted?
The Venezuelans are learning from Trump. You see what Trump does? Can anyone negotiate with him? Does anyone have trust with him? And he's still getting away with it. So they think that if he can get away with it in the open, large democracy in the United States, it's a piece of cake for them to do that.
And in a broader human rights context, how should international actors respond to mixed signals of prisoner releases and subsequent arrests when evaluating Venezuela's political trajectory?
The international community should advise the opposition leaders that it is an internal domestic issue. They have to sort it out with the regime instead of going to United States. That's what happened in Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Uruguay, Paraguay, where they had much more brutal dictatorships. They didn't go to America. In fact, America was supporting those dictatorships. So the people, they struggled, and then finally they negotiated and got a deal, and they gave amnesty to them. So in this case, the opposition, they are not talking about amnesty and a deal for the rulers, because they are, the American government has announced bounties, like the vice president has bounty of $25 million, and the chief of armed forces has $15 million. Still over $100 million of bounties are on the heads of these people. So why don't this opposition go to Americans and say that please remove these bounties and stop the sanction? Then we will deal with this government and we will negotiate with them directly. That is the only way.
Thank you. Don't go too far, as we will be back with you very shortly.
Okay.
Havana streets are eerily quiet as emergency measures kicked in